All right. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep, diving, I guess you could say, into the world of coding.
Oh, exciting.
But don't worry, you don't have to be a programmer to follow along with this one, I promise.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about options and enums in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central.
Okay.
And I know that sounds super technical and maybe even a little bit boring, but trust me on this.
Okay.
The source we're looking at is a YouTube tutorial for people learning this programming language called AL, but it actually brings up this really fundamental decision-making process that I think we can all relate to, which is choosing the right tool for the job.
Oh, I like that.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see how this seemingly very technical concept actually mirrors choices we make in our own lives all the time.
That's fascinating how that kind of bleeds into our everyday life, I think, even if we don't realize it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to give everyone a little bit of context, we're talking about Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, which is this software that businesses use to manage things like their finances and operations.
Right.
And AL is this programming language that the people use to kind of customize and build on top of that software.
Yeah, a lot of specialized tool for that specific software.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And within AL, programmers also need to define kind of sets of choices or values that users can select from. And that's where options and enums come in.
Okay, I see.
And the instructor in this video uses a really great analogy to explain this.
Okay.
So imagine you're building a system for handling payments, right? You need a way to represent different payment methods like cash, card, UPI, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And so one way to do this is to use an option. It's kind of like creating a simple drop-down menu specifically for that data point.
Oh, okay, so like a predefined list of choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So let's say you have this table in your system called sales orders. Within that table, you could define an option field for payment method. And that field would have those choices like cash, card, or UPI.
I see. So it's like saying, for this particular piece of information in this table, here are the valid options.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
It's straightforward, and it's contained kind of within that table's context. Now, an enum, which is short for enumeration, is a little bit different.
Okay.
It's more like creating a separate independent object that defines those payment methods.
So instead of being tied to that specific table, it's like a more general definition of payment methods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you're creating this, I don't know, like a dictionary of payment methods that your entire program can refer to.
Right. A master list that can be used anywhere.
Exactly. And this has a couple of big advantages. One is consistency. Instead of defining payment methods differently in different parts of your code, you have this one central definition.
That makes sense, so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, it's like having a style guide for your code. You know what I mean? Everyone knows what cash or card actually means.
Okay.
And the second advantage is reusability. So you can use this payment methods enum in any table or page in your project, which promotes a more organized and efficient, coding structure.
So it's about picking the right level of organization and flexibility depending on your needs.
Exactly. And that's kind of the heart of what we're talking about here.
All right.
Options are simple and specific to a table, while enums are reusable and they provide this consistency across your entire program.
Now, what's interesting is that both options and enums, they might look the same to the user, like in a drop-down menu or something.
Right.
But behind the scenes, they work a little differently.
Okay, so what's going on behind the curtain?
Well, both options and enums, they're actually tied to numerical values.
Okay.
But with options, those numbers are assigned manually by the programmer.
Okay.
So, for example, cash might be 1, card might be 2, and so on.
Got it.
Enums, on the other hand, they're automatically numbered by the system, starting from 0.
I see. So there's like this hidden layer of numbers.
Yeah.
That's how the computer understands those choices.
Exactly.
Right.
So it might seem like a small detail, but it actually has big implications for how programmers, think about organizing data.
Right. So even though they look the same to the user, the programmer has to make a conscious decision about which one to use.
Exactly.
Based on what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and that decision can have a ripple effect on how easy it is to maintain and update the code in the future.
Right.
And that's where this concept of extensibility comes in.
Okay, so let's talk about extensibility.
Yeah.
What does that even mean in this context?
Basically, it means being able to add new options later on without breaking your code. Okay.
So going back to our payment methods,
Uh-huh.
let's say your business suddenly starts accepting cryptocurrency.
Okay.
With an enum, you can just add crypto as a new option,
Right.
and it won't mess up any of the existing code that uses that payment method's enum.
Interesting. So it's like enums are these expandable containers. They can accommodate new options as things change.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Options, on the other hand, they're more like fixed-size boxes.
Okay.
If you want to add a new payment method, you might have to go back and recode different parts of your program,
Right.
which can be a real pain.
Yeah, that sounds messy.
It is.
So even if you're not a programmer, you can see how this idea of extensibility, it's really important. It's about thinking ahead and choosing a solution that can adapt to change.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a principle that goes beyond just coding.
Right.
Like think about organizing files on your computer.
Yeah.
If you create a rigid folder structure, it might work for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but as you get more files, you might wish you had a more flexible system. Oh, tell me about it. I'm always reorganizing my files.
Yeah, we've all been there.
So choosing between an option and an enum, it's kind of like choosing between a fixed folder structure and a more adaptable tagging system.
Exactly.
Both approaches have their pros and cons, and the best choice just depends on the situation.
Right. The context and your needs.
Now, I'm kind of curious to see how these concepts actually play out in code.
Yeah, me too.
In the next part of our deep dive, let's take a peek under the hood and see how options and enums are actually defined in the AL programming language.
Sounds good.
Don't worry, we'll explain everything clearly, even if you've never seen a line of code in your life.
Absolutely.
So stick with us.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
It'll be an adventure.
It will. So picking up where we left off, let's actually look at how options and enums are defined in the AL code.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit technical here.
A little bit, yeah.
But I think it's good to kind of see how these concepts actually work in practice,
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like seeing the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, exactly.
So the YouTube instructor walks us through the process of defining an enum. And it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You start with this keyword, tenum,
Okay.
which basically tells the system, hey, we're about to define an enumeration.
Got it.
And then you give it an ID and a name, just like you would name a file on your computer.
Okay.
So let's stick with our payment method example.
Okay.
It looks something like this.
Okay.
You'd have, tenum, let's say 50102, that's just an arbitrary ID number,
Okay.
and then payment method.
So it's like creating a labeled container for
Yeah.
payment methods.
Exactly, yeah. And then inside this container, we list out the possible values.
Okay.
And each of those values automatically gets assigned an integer starting from 0.
Right.
So it would look something like this. Value 0, cash. Then in the next line, value 1, card.
I see. So cash is 0, card is 1, and UPI would be 2, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
And those numbers are what the computer actually uses to keep track of everything.
Exactly, behind the scenes, yeah.
Okay.
And there's also this line that says extensible true.
Okay.
And that's kind of the magic ingredient that makes enum so adaptable.
Got it.
It's like saying, hey, this container, it can grow.
Right.
If we need to add crypto as a payment method later on, we can just extend the enum
Right.
without messing up anything else.
That's really cool. It's like a small detail in the code, but it has this big impact on how flexible the system is.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Now, defining an option is even simpler.
Okay.
Remember, options are tied to a specific table or page.
Right.
So let's say you have a field called gender in a table.
Okay.
You would define the options right there within that field declaration.
Okay.
It would look something like this,
Wow.
field, give it an ID number, gender, and then the type is option. And then inside curly brackets, you say option members, male, female, other.
So with options, we're not creating this separate object like we did with enums.
Yeah, right.
We're just listing the choices right there.
Exactly. Simpler to define, but less flexible.
Got it. Got it.
Now, the instructor also points out that there's a difference in how you actually use enums and options in your code.
Okay.
So because an enum is its own separate object,
All right.
you have to explicitly call it or reference it in your code.
Okay.
It's like saying, hey, code, go look at this payment method enum I created earlier and use its values here.
Whereas with options, they're already kind of built into the table or page. So
Exactly.
you can just use them directly.
Right. It's kind of like having to go to the grocery store every time you need an ingredient
Oh, okay.
versus having all the ingredients in your pantry already.
Got it, yeah.
Sometimes that trip to the store is worth it for the flexibility and organization, and sometimes it's better to just keep things simple.
Right, right. It's like how we organize information in our own lives,
Yeah.
Sometimes a simple list is enough,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes you need a more sophisticated system, with categories and tags and all that.
Exactly. Yeah, like think about managing your email.
Hmm.
You could just have one big inbox for everything.
Right.
Or you could create folders for different projects or
Or you
categories.
use labels or tags even.
Exactly. Yeah, there are all these different ways to do it.
Yeah.
It's about finding the right balance.
Right, right. Between simplicity and complexity.
Yeah.
So going back to options and enums,
Yeah.
it seems like both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. Yeah. Options are straightforward and easy to implement,
Uh-huh.
but they're less flexible and they can lead to inconsistencies if you're not careful.
Right.
Enums, on the other hand, they promote consistency and reusability,
Hmm.
but they require a bit more planning up front,
Great.
and they can be a little more complex to work with.
So it's a classic trade-off.
It is.
And as we've seen, it's a trade-off that we face in lots of areas of our lives,
Yeah, all the time.
not just coding.
All the time.
Now, I'm kind of curious to hear about some of the maybe nuances or even downsides of both options and enums, because even the best tools have their limitations.
Yeah, definitely. And the instructor actually talks about that a little bit too.
Okay, great.
In the next part of our deep dive, let's explore that a bit more.
Okay, sounds good. So welcome back to our deep dive into options and enums.
Yeah.
We've talked about what they are, how they're used in code,
Uh-huh.
but as with anything, in life, there are always trade-offs.
Right. Always trade-offs.
And the instructor in the video does a good job of pointing out some of the potential, I guess, downsides of both options and enums.
Yeah. No tool is perfect.
Right, exactly.
Just to know the limitations.
So what are some of the things that we need to watch out for with options?
Well, one thing to remember is those numerical values we talked about,
Okay.
the ones that are assigned manually,
Mm-hmm.
those can actually be a source of errors if you're not careful.
Okay.
Like, let's say you accidentally swap the numbers for cash and card.
Oh, okay.
That could really mess things up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, like swapping the labels on your spice jars.
Right. Salt in your coffee, not good.
Exactly.
So with options, it's really important to be diligent and pay attention to detail.
Yeah, they're simple, but that simplicity can also lead to, human error.
Right. Okay, what about enums?
Well, enums, they don't have that specific problem because the numbering is automatic,
Uh-huh.
but they introduce a different kind of constraint when it comes to extensibility.
Okay, remind me about extensibility again.
So we talked about how you can add new options to an enum
Right.
without breaking the code.
Right. That was a big plus.
But there's a catch.
Okay.
You can add new options. Uh-huh.
But you can't really change the meaning of existing ones.
Okay.
Let's say for some reason you decided that cash in your payment method enum should now include checks as well.
Okay.
You can't just modify the existing cash
Yeah.
option.
Oh, I see.
You'd have to create a whole new enum.
Got it. So they're good for adding new options, but not for like redefining existing ones.
Exactly. It's like having a house with a solid foundation
Sure.
you can build up. But changing the foundation itself,
Right.
that's a big deal.
That's a big project.
Yeah.
So enums are flexible in some ways, but they also have these constraints that you have to be aware of.
Definitely. It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
The instructor also mentioned something about visibility being different between options and enums.
Oh, yeah, that's an important one.
What was that about?
So options are defined within a specific table, right?
Uh-huh.
So they're only visible within that table's context.
Okay.
Enums, on the other hand, they're like these separate objects.
Right.
So they're visible across your entire project.
So any programmer working on the project can see the predefined options.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like having a publicly posted list of rules
Okay.
versus having those rules scattered across different documents.
Right. Harder to find, harder to keep track of.
Exactly. So enums promote this kind of shared understanding,
Right.
which is really important when you're working on big projects.
Right. Yeah. So both options and enums have their pluses and minuses.
For sure.
And And choosing the right one really depends on the specifics of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, the complexity, the need for flexibility, the importance of consistency.
Right, right. And it seems like the big takeaway here isn't so much about like memorizing all the details of options and enums, but
Hmm.
more about understanding the broader principles of decision making.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, whether you're writing code or organizing your life or leading a team, it's about thinking about the trade-offs
Thinking about the potential downsides of different choices.
and striving for clarity and consistency.
Right, yeah, and I think this deep dive has given our listeners a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
We started with this seemingly very niche topic in coding,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up talking about these really fundamental principles that apply to all kinds of things.
It's funny how that happens. You never know where a deep dive will take you.
That's true, that's true.
Yeah.
So as you go about your day, dear listener, think about the lessons we've learned from options and enums.
Yeah.
Think about the choices you make, big and small,
Mm-hmm.
and consider the trade-offs.
Yeah.
What level of flexibility do you need? What are the potential downsides? How can you make your decisions as clear and consistent as possible?
Those are good questions.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Well, see you next time.